and see that whatever I see in them is inside me. I don't end up putting them on pedestals or pits. I end up putting them in a heart, in my heart. You've probably heard of the term intimacy. And most people, when you think of the word intimacy, you think of possibly sexuality with some partner, maybe kissing and hugging and things of that nature. But I'd like to explore deeper this term intimacy and give it a new definition. So I'm going to demartinize the word intimacy and give you a deeper appreciation for what it really is, not what people have assumed it has been for centuries. When you meet somebody and you are infatuated with them, which in all probability you've had a moment you've done, you are conscious of the behavioral traits that they're displaying that are supportive of your higher values. And therefore, you tend to open up to them and want to consume them as if they were prey, like an animal wants to eat prey and consume it. You can also be resentful to somebody and be conscious of the downsides, unconscious of the upsides, and want to avoid being consumed. So those are responses between things that we perceive that are supportive or challenging to our higher values in our life, things that are most important down to mid-importance. And so most people have associated intimacy with the supportive side. When you see more similarities and differences, think about the time when you're highly infatuated with somebody, you see more similarities than differences. When you're highly resentful to somebody, you see more differences than similarities. When you're infatuated, you say, oh my God, we have the same number of eyes, same number of teeth, same number of ribs, same number of arms and legs. We must be soulmates. That's because we're seeing similarities without differences. When we're seeing differences, we don't have anything in common. We're going in two different directions. We don't see eye to eye, and it doesn't work anymore. So one makes us want to consume, and the other wants to avoid. And most people think of intimacy when they're in that consumptive phase, that similarity over differences, that support more than challenge, advantage over disadvantage. And you're conscious of the upsides, unconscious of the downside. And that is a form of intimacy, no doubt. But there's a deeper intimacy. And this is a transcendent intimacy. And this is the one that is almost a mystical experience for people who truly have love for each other. And this is when they realize that whatever they perceive in this individual, they perceive also in themselves to the same degree. There's no distinctions. In other words, if you meet somebody that you resent, and all of a sudden you ask, what specific trait, action or inaction, do I perceive them displaying or demonstrating that I despise most? And you actually itemize what that is. Make a list if there's more than one. And then go inside yourself and ask yourself this question, or tell yourself this statement. Go to a moment, John, where and when you perceived yourself displaying or demonstrating that same or similar specific trait, action, or inaction. And if you go and look at where you did it, when you did it, to who you've done it to, and who perceives you do that, and do that again and again and again, and look really integrally and honestly until the quantity and quality of what you perceive in them is now equally reflected in perceiving you. The moment you own the traits and the behaviors you see in them, you realize you have reflective awareness. And that means instead of decoying and deflecting them and going, I'm too proud to admit that what I see in them is inside me, I own it. And once I own what I see in them, you now realize the balance of similarities and differences. Yes, the way I see it in them, I see in me, but it's through my values, which are slightly different. So now you have a perfect blend of similarities and difference. You own the traits that you perceive in them. So you have a reflective awareness. And so there's a similarity, even though there's a difference. In that moment, when you do that, you have a intimacy. Intimacy is proportionate to pure reflective awareness. That means if you see a trait you admire, that you're conscious of the upsides to and unconscious of the downside. And you ask, okay, go, John, to a moment where and when you perceive yourself displaying or demonstrating the specific trait, action, inaction you admire in them. Where was it? When was it? Who did you do it to? And who perceives it? If I own all the traits that I both admire and despise, like and dislike, attracted and repelled from, and own all of them, and see that whatever I see in them is inside me, I don't end up putting them on pedestals or pits. I end up putting them in my heart. And when I put them in my heart and have pure reflective awareness, I have true intimacy. See, while we're infatuated with somebody and we think we have intimacy, we're actually blind to the downsides, and we're too proud to admit we have those. And we're blocking those out with the subjective bias, confirmation bias, and the disconfirmation bias. But when we actually own both sides, the things we like and dislike, now we have true reflective state and true intimacy. When you are with somebody and you're dating somebody or going to marry somebody possibly, you're going to get things you like and dislike. If you walked up to them and tried to project onto them that you're always nice, never mean, always kind, never cruel, always positive, never negative, they wouldn't believe it. And your own intuition would be whispering to you, that's not believable. You're blind to the downside. And if you went there and said, well, you're always mean, you're never nice, you're always cruel, you're never kind, you're always negative, you're never positive, again, you wouldn't believe it. And they wouldn't either, because their intuition would be constantly whispering their unconsciousness to try to help them be whole. People want to be loved and appreciated for who they are, and you do too. And that's including both the things you like and dislike, admire and despise, the hero and the villain, the saint, the sinner, the virtue and the vice, all the above. You don't need to get rid of half of yourself to love yourself. You don't need to get rid of any part of them to love them. It's just simply asking, where and when do I display and demonstrate whatever I see in them? And to the degree that I do that, and I own all the traits that I perceive in them that I'm attracted or repelled from, both, not just one side, both sides, I come and have a deep intimacy and I start to love them unconditionally. And that level of intimacy is a profound intimacy that allows resilience and adaptability, and that occurs more spontaneously when we're both in the relationship living according to what we value most. Because whenever we're living by priority, our blood glucose and oxygen goes into the forebrain, and we end up being more objective, and we end up not having subjective biases, and we tend to not polarize our perceptions. We tend to synthesize them. And when we do, we tend to own the traits and have reflective awareness, which is the highest level of awareness. And this leads to true intimacy. So don't confuse a puppy love and a little infatuation where you're blind to the downside and disowning parts with real true intimacy, because it can fool you. You can actually have a fatal attraction like Michael Douglas and Glenn Close in the movie, where you're infatuated with a part and then you end up finding out broadsided by the other side. And you've owned one, similars more than differences, but disown the other. I want you to own all the above, because when you actually own all the traits you see in other people and realize you've displayed and demonstrated the same things they have in your own way, you have both similarities and differences, and maximum growth and development occurs at the border of similars and differences. Maximum love and true intimacy occurs at the border of support and challenge and pairs of opposites, similars and differences. And the moment you do that, you get to love the individual for who they are. They want to be loved, and you want to be loved for who you are. And you are all the above. You have both sides. You're not one-sided. And if you try to put on a facade that you're one side, you'll live with a moral hypocrisy and eventually be trapped by it. But if you embrace both sides and own both sides, you can experience true and lasting intimacy. Because when you're able to appreciate both sides and love them for who they are, they turn into who you love. So I just want to make a distinction about the initial assumed form of intimacy that most people think of when they're infatuated, where they want to, get close to them sexually, and a true intimacy, which is a mystical intimacy when you look eyes into eyes and you feel heart to heart and you feel that there's a pure reflective awareness. That is available. I teach in the Breakthrough Experience the Demartini method for that state. And that state is profound and it's meaningful and it's fulfilling, and it helps both parties fulfill what they value most in life and have the most fulfillment in life. So I just want to make that distinction between true intimacy and the superficial form of intimacy that most people associate with it.